All right.
Both been the same past year for a long time.
Morning. We're going to have to move our picnic to the building today.
I was afraid that might happen.
Right?
I'm worried about
Pretty sure
that.
of it?
Yeah, it's about a 60% right around the time we're trying to get out there and do everything. And I was telling Don Gregory that if it's like a 5-minute pop-up thunderstorm while you're trying to set up, it can ruin anything you're trying to work on. And
True.
I'd rather play it safe. All right. We're going to go ahead and get started. We are in the book of Obadiah, so if you want to turn over in your Bibles to that minor prophet, that's where we're going to be this morning. Obadiah. Right after Amos. Right before Jonah. Isn't that right? I have to make sure. That's right. All right, so the theme of Obadiah, and like I told you, we're going to go through these minor prophets in a textual way. So we're going to be going. I'm telling you, it is verse by verse this morning. So we've got 21 verses or so that I've prepared for us to be able to go through. But as we get into this, I want to introduce a few things and help us to understand. I've always said that it's important for us to understand the historical context behind any book of the Bible or anything that you're studying. When it comes to biblical studying, it's important to understand what's going on in the time period, what's going on, at the time of the writing, and just the even down to the geographically what's happening in the area that the book is being written, or in the area that the book is going to be sent to, or the letter is going to be sent to. And so this is no exception at all. We kind of want to know a little bit more about Obadiah. We want to know a little bit more about the people that he's preaching to and those kinds of things. So we're going to go through that historical background here in just a moment. But the theme of Obadiah is really, it's about judgment of Edom. Judgment of Edom. And we'll break this book down into basically two sections. The first section will be the judgment of Edom. And then the second section will be more about how God will preserve just a few out of Mount Zion. Okay, so that's really how the book is broken down. It is the shortest book in the whole Old Testament, just 21 verses for us to look at. And so it is a series of divine poems that are against Edom, which was this neighboring nation of Israel on the southern side of the Dead Sea. All right, and I've got a map for us to look at here in just a little bit, and so we'll look at that for in a little bit before I get too far. But I want to tell you a little bit about Obadiah as we go through this. Obadiah, there's like 13 men in the Bible that are named Obadiah, and so we always wonder, who is this Obadiah? And I've got my own theory about who it may be. One possibility is that this is the Obadiah who was Ahab's steward, King Ahab's steward. Ahab and his wife Jezebel, wicked people, and perhaps Obadiah was one of those people that was his steward that wrote this judgment upon Edom. This Obadiah rescued 100 prophets from Ahab's wife Jezebel. She goes out to try to kill them, and Obadiah rescues them. She tried to kill him, and he took these prophets 50 by 50 and hid them in caves to protect them. And he provided bread and water to them. This is from 1 Kings chapter 18. And he took care of them while they hunkered down while Jezebel was after them. And that's pretty interesting as well. Verse 12 of 1 Kings chapter 18 says that Obadiah was faithful to the Lord from his youth. And so that's one possibility. Another possibility is that this is the Obadiah who was sent by Jehoshaphat to teach the law in Judah. In 2 Chronicles chapter 17 and verse 7, that is mentioned. So it could be that guy. It could also be the Obadiah who during the preparing of the temple served as a construction supervisor. This is 2 Chronicles chapter 34 and verse 12. This was during the 8th year of King Josiah. So you know Josiah was the youngest king. How old was Josiah when he became king? Does anybody remember? 8 years old. And so here it is, the 8th year of his reign. So how old is Josiah now? He's 16 years old. He's a teenager. And Obadiah and Jahath were tasked to oversee the renovation and the repairing of the temple under King Josiah. And they worked, the Bible says that they worked to oversee workmen from job to job. All right, so they saw the job that needed to be done, and they would take care of that, and they would take care of that. And so that may be who this is. But really, whoever this Obadiah is, whoever he was, his message contains valuable lessons for us today. So we don't really know exactly which Obadiah, but there's several of them. And that's 3 of them that we have a little bit more details about. All right? But the whole theme of the book of Obadiah is this judgment on Edom. So let's look more into the historical background information about this. So there are two dates that people have said this is when Obadiah wrote this. One being 845 BC and one 586 BC. And the reason is really simple. The reason is because the Obadiah mentions an attack on Jerusalem. And so there are 2 times that this happened. Now, I think that it's the 845 date. It's an earlier date. That's why we're studying Obadiah first, because chronologically, he would have been the first minor prophet that we have recorded for us. So I think it's an earlier date of 845 and not the 586, and there's reason behind it. The reasons are really, really simple. During the days of Jehoram, 848 to 844, the Philistines and the Arabians attacked the city. All right? And so that's 2 Chronicles chapter 21. And so then we have this stylistic language that Obadiah uses that's very, very much not the same kind of language that Jeremiah uses. So Jeremiah is a later prophet. All right? So, language changes, doesn't it? Have you ever noticed that, how language changes? When I was a kid or a teenager, we would say things like, man, that's cool, or that's, rad. I don't know. Language changes. People don't use the same kind of language even 20 years later. So here we're talking about a few hundred years later, and language changes. So the language of Jeremiah's day is different than Obadiah the way that he writes. And so I say that it's an earlier date and not with Jeremiah. And then there's no mention of the destruction of the temple in Obadiah or the deportation to Babylon, which that's what took place in 586. And so the Babylon came in to destroy the people of Israel, destroyed Jerusalem, and they took them out of their land. Well, there's no mention about Babylon here. There's no mention of that, and nor any kind of remnant who went on into Egypt. And so that puts it, again, since it doesn't really mention that, still makes us think it's got to be this earlier date of 845. So really, when we look at this, we need to look at the backstory behind this book and the people that Obadiah is writing to. So the judgment is upon this country of Edom, and more than any other nation that's mentioned in the Old Testament, Edom is the supreme object of God's wrath. All right, so more than anybody else, Edom gets more of that kind of wrath judgment from the minor prophets. From Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Joel, Amos, and Malachi, they all mention Edom and the judgment and the wrath of God. The people of Edom are unique because they had shared an ancestry with the people of Israel. Does anybody know how that ancestry is tied to the people of Israel? I mentioned a little bit of it last week. Does anybody remember?
Esau.
Yeah, it's through Esau. Absolutely. And Esau and who were brothers? All right, who are their parents? Isaac and Rebekah. And who are Isaac's parents? Abraham and Sarah. So it goes down from Abraham and Sarah down to Isaac and Rebekah, and then the two brothers, Jacob and Esau. And when you look at Jacob and Esau, they had an interesting relationship. They had a relationship that was very tense at different times. They both had a name change. Jacob changes over to Israel, and Esau, his name is changed over to Edom. And so that's what we have here. They had this tense relationship. And at the same time, though, by the end of the book of Genesis, or well, not the exact end, but chapter 32, 33, Jacob and Esau reconcile their differences, but their descendants were often at odds with each other. And that's what we find here in Obadiah. These two brotherly descendants, or the descendants of these brothers, are struggling with this relationship that they have with each other. So here's this map here to help us to see a little bit about where Edom is. So it's just south of Judah, and the king of Israel up there in the blue, then Judah down here in the pinkish color, and then Edom is this whole area that's in the yellow at the very bottom of that. So really interesting. Now later on in their history, they're attacked by Arabs, and they are forced to live in the southern part of Judah. So they all kind of have to pull out of that whole area, and they live in the southern part of Judah. And that happens around the time of the intertestamental time. Remember us talking about the time period between the last prophet and the time of Jesus, where we don't have any recordings for about 400 years. So this time period that's right there is the time that the Maccabees came in and they attacked Edom and forced them into Judah. So that's an interesting little thing right there. So that gives us a perspective of where this is. They're just neighbors. They're neighbors right there with the people of Israel.
Alex?
Yes, sir.
I guess this is a geography question. What is that place called now?
Oh gosh, I don't even know. I can't remember off the top of my head. It'd still be a part of the people of Israel, the nation of Israel. It really would. Israel has taken it back. Now, not all of it, and that's the problem. So the predestinationalist, okay, people that believe that Jesus is going to come back and establish a kingdom here on earth all over again. He'll reign for 1,000 years. Okay, that's what predestination is, or not premillennialism. They think that Jesus is going to reign for 1,000 years on earth. They believe that the prophecies found in Obadiah have yet to have come true. Okay? So they're thinking that this judgment is going to come upon them, and then all of Israel will be able to take over the rest of the land that's right there. Okay? So they were waiting for that to happen. All right? So anyway, yes, ma'am.
The Google machine says that it is partially Israel, partially Jordan,
Yeah.
partially Egypt.
Yeah, so it's a divided area. Partially Egypt, partially Jordan, and partially Israel. But those premillennialists think that Israel's going to take over all the rest of that and become the nation that Jesus is going to reign over for 1,000 years. Yeah, so they're waiting for, and by the end of the book of Obadiah here in a moment, we'll see that prophecy that's taking place. But we're going to make application biblically and sound doctrinally, and not the way that premillennialists will make that determination. Okay? All right, so when those people came in, the Arabs came in and took over during the time of the Maccabees around 100 BC. So this is about 100 years before Jesus. They forced those Edomites up into the southern part of Judah, and they forced them to be circumcised, and some of them accepted the law of Moses. And many of those people became Jewish proselytes. Herod the Great was one of them, who was an Edomite that came up and accepted Judaism, kind of. All right? They still struggle with it. All right, so the message of Obadiah is the fall of Edom. This is the two-part that we're going to divide it up in. The fall of Edom, verses 1 through 14. And then, I guess we'll talk a little bit about that. So there is this horrible problem of pride among Edom. They just dominated their lives. They were really, really prideful about who they were, and all of the nations. Obadiah's message is that all of the nations should be punished for their pride, not just Edom, but definitely Edom because of how prideful they are. And really, Edom's pride is an example of the human condition of how we all sin and fall short. That's the root of sin, is what it is. Pride is. But there's hope. There's hope in this new Jerusalem, a place where all the rescued of all the nations will be redeemed. And so Edom is going to be, judged because of their pride, but also because of their cruelty to Israel, their relatives. And then the second half of it, verses 15 through 21, is really the rise of Zion. So you've got the fall of Edom. It's a way to remember Obadiah. The fall of Edom, the rise of Zion. Super easy to remember that. And how all the rescued shall be redeemed. All right, so let's get right into the text, all right? Verses 1 through 2. Verses 1 through 2. This is what the judgment is coming upon Edom. That's what the whole section is about right here. Verses 1 through 2. All right? It says, the vision of Obadiah. Thus says the Lord concerning Edom. We have heard a report from the Lord, and an envoy has been sent among the nations, saying, arise and let us go against her for battle. Behold, I will make you small among the nations. You are greatly despised. So what is Obadiah telling us right here? The focus is on the sin of Edom and the coming judgment upon them. A vision of Obadiah. He says the report has come. Here Obadiah is giving this report. He's releasing the information, and it's not just his report. It's not just Obadiah saying something. He says this report, it's from the Lord. It's from the Lord. And so he's letting it all know. He's letting everybody know about what's happening. God is going to bring nations against Edom in battle. That is the way that God had always brought judgment upon nations who were in rebellion against him. He would rise up other nations to exercise his wrath upon them. The same thing happened with the people of Israel in their rebellion and in their rejection of God, God would raise up some kind of a nation to punish them. And it happened throughout all of their history. And so here, God is going to rise up other nations to punish Edom. And all these nations are going to bring battle against him. He says, we've heard the report. This envoy has been sent among the nations. Arise and let us go against her for battle. Her, in this instance, is Edom. He says, behold, I'll make you small. That's a big deal right there. God's going to make them small because they think that they're big. They think they're something now. They are so prideful. And God says, I'm going to bring you down. I'm going to bring you way down. All right, verse 3. Verse 3. It says, the arrogance of your heart has deceived you. Here's their pride being mentioned specifically. The arrogance of your heart has deceived you. You who live in the clefts of the rock, in the loftiness of your dwelling place, who say in your heart, who will bring me down to earth? They're arrogant. Their prideful heart has led them astray. And that's a problem that everybody goes through. That's what the problem of sin is it's just the root of it is pride. And so that's what their problem is. Their pridefulness has led them astray. And the Edomites, they boasted, specifically here it's mentioned, about where they lived. You who live in the clefts of the rock, in the loftiness of your dwelling place. And they say, who's going to bring us down? Who's going to take us? Who's going to bring us back down? And this is really interesting because it's important for us to see in verse 4, he goes on to say, though you build high like the eagle, though you set your nest among the stars, from there I will bring you down, declares the Lord. So the question is answered. Who's going to bring us down to earth? Well, it's answered right here at the very end of verse 4. From there I will bring you down, declares the Lord. So pride is so integrated in fallen human nature that even if we don't have much to be proud about, we'll find something to exalt ourselves about. And so this reminds us that you don't have to be rich or powerful or great to be filled with pride. Sometimes those who have the least reason for pride have the most of it. Here, the Edomites, they boasted in their secure defenses. It's interesting because the ancient city of Petra, which was once the capital city of Edom, it's known as Salah, had amazing defenses. Where they had built this city, it was really interesting. They carved out this city in the crevices of the rocks and caves. And it was only accessible through this narrow canyon, almost a mile long, to be able to get to their city. And so at the very end of the canyon is this beautiful place that was carved out in stone, and it seemed like nobody could come in and take them. Nobody could do it. It makes me think about, do you remember in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade? They go down that long canyon, they're riding on horseback, and then they get to the city. They call it the city of Alexandria. And there's this, what looks to be just a building that's carved out into stone. And they go in there and they find the cup of Christ, right? So, the Holy Grail. That's what I picture in my mind, but here's some actual ancient pictures of this city. Right here. And I've got some more too to show you, but these are interesting. So the Edomites were located the south of the Dead Sea, and they built their cities in these cliffs, and they thought that they were completely impregnable. And after the prophecy of Obadiah, the Edomites were overcome by the Arabs and were forced to settle in the south part of Judah, remember? And so here's another picture for us to see. You could go there today and see some of that. Wouldn't that be neat? And then one more. This is my favorite one. That really does look like Indiana Jones right there, folks. It really does. Especially that part right here. Doesn't that look like that building that they used in the movie? I don't know. I think it was pretty interesting. So that's what we find. They thought they were impregnable. They thought that they had great defenses, and they were prideful in where they lived. And so Obadiah goes on to say, this is from the Lord, if thieves came to you, if robbers by night, how you will be ruined. Would they not steal only until they had enough? If grape gatherers came to you, would they not leave some gleanings? And so what does Obadiah tell them? He says the judgment's going to be way worse than when robbers come to steal. Because they stop when they have enough. They'll stop at some point. A number of years ago, Kira and I had our house broken into. I think I've used this example, but this is an interesting way of looking at it. Our house was broken into and some things were stolen, tools from my garage, TV off the wall. I had a TV mounted and they just took it off the wall. They didn't take the power cord. They didn't take the remote. They just took the TV. Or, there's no stand. So I don't know how these people are, I don't know, I guess maybe they hung it on their wall. I don't know. But they took some things. They took some change and jewelry from Rachel's room. She was just a toddler. Just broke back the window in the back of the house to get in. But they only took so much. We still had things, They left my vintage Klipsch speakers that I had, which I'm thrilled with. I was really glad about that. That would be really hard to replace. But, they don't take everything. But God here is telling the people of Edom through Obadiah that when he comes and the judgment comes, there's nothing left. Robbers come in and you'll be ruined. But would they not steal only until they have enough? There's a stopping point for those robbers. There's a stopping point. When they get enough or when they can't fill anything else up in their truck or their car and they'll drive off. Well, God says it doesn't stop with that. There'll be nothing left when I come and bring judgment upon you. And so the judgment's going to be far worse because it's going to be like when someone harvests out of their vineyard. Notice what it says, if grape gatherers come to you, would they not leave some gleaning? So when you go out into your garden, you gather some fruits that are ripe, but you don't pick everything, do you? You don't pick everything. You look at some of it. Remember, Kira will go out there, we'll say, we'll leave that green bean for another day. We'll leave that green bean because we're going to let it grow just a little bit longer. I'm going to let that tomato ripen just a little bit more before I pick it off the garden. You don't take every bit of the fruit off. You leave some of it. God says, I'm not leaving anything. When I come, and it's going to be judgment upon Edom, it's going to be wiped out. They'll leave some things. Gatherers will. Robbers will leave some things. But not me. Not me. Verse 6 through 7. Oh, how Esau will be ransacked and his hidden treasures searched out. All the men allied with you will send you forth to the border, and the men at peace with you will deceive you and overpower you. They will eat your bread, will set an ambush for you, and there is no understanding in him. So God says that Edom is going to be like you're searching through a junk drawer. You ever done that? You open up your junk drawer and you're looking for something specific. And you're like, I think it's in there. And what do? This is what I do. I start throwing stuff. If you're ransacking, you're taking things and there's no rhyme or reason. There's no order to it. You're going through, searching for something, and everything else doesn't matter. You're looking for that one thing. And God's judgment upon Edom will be such, where he goes through it, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just destruction constantly. All the hidden treasures are searched out. It's like going through the junk drawer. And Edom will know the sting of treachery because their allies double-crossed them. So he says here, those people that are allied with you, they're going to send you to the border. And that's a prophecy that actually happened. Whenever the very end of the time of Edom, they're sent where? To that border between where Edom was and the southern part of Judah. We see that happening. And that's like 200 or 300 years later. No, wait, more than that. Way more than that, sorry. So like 600 or 700 years later. this piece of the prophecy takes place. Those allies, they'll deceive you and they'll overpower you. They'll eat your bread and they'll set this ambush up for you. You'll be double-crossed. And Esau, we're using the terminology here, Esau and Edom, that's interchangeable right here, because he's saying how Esau will be ransacked. So now Esau is going to be flabbergasted. They're going to look at this and say, I don't know what happened. This judgment came upon us and we don't know what's gone on. We don't understand this. What happened? Verse 8 through 9. God says, will I not on that day, declares the Lord, destroy wise men from Edom and understanding from the mountains of Esau? Then your mighty men will be dismayed, O Teman, so that everyone may be cut off from the mountain of Esau by slaughter. God says, your wisdom and your education is not going to get you out of the judgment from the Lord. You're going to have to face it. You think that you know better, it's not going to do you any good whatsoever. Wise men will be destroyed, and the understanding, it doesn't make any difference. You're going to face the consequences. Strength and valor, no, it's not going to do you any good. You'll have mighty men, but that's not going to do you one bit of good at all. You're going to have to face it. This name that's mentioned here, Teman, is a descendant of Esau. Esau had different sons, so this is Teman's grandson. Esau's grandson is named Teman. All right, so they're making that connection there. Those descendants. You may have these mighty men, but it's not going to get you anywhere at all. No one's going to be able to get to the high ground. He says, so everyone will be cut off from the mountain of Esau by slaughter. No one's be able to get to the high. That's what happens a lot of times when you are in a battle or when you're trying to be rescued. If a flood comes, you want to get to the high ground. You want the high ground. Everybody's going to be cut off from the mountain of Esau. Why? Because everybody's going to be dead already. There's no rescuing you at all. They're going to be dead. Verse 10 through 11. Because of violence to your brother Jacob, you'll be covered with shame, and you'll be cut off forever. On that day that you stood aloof, on that day that strangers carried off his wealth, and foreigners entered his gate and cast lots for Jerusalem, you too were as one of them. Edom was violent towards his brother Jacob, or Israel. Violent towards them. And so when people attacked Judah, Edom would stand back and just watch it happen. Just watch it happen. Enough to where, I think he mentions gates here in just a moment in the next verse or something like that. We'll get to it, I guess. And so he says, you might as well have joined in with them. You might as well have just been a part of it, because you just sat back aloof, is what he says, aloof, and watched it happen as they were attacking. And that's shameful. Shameful. And so verse 12, he says, do not gloat over your brother's day, the day of his misfortune. And do not rejoice over the sons of Judah in the day of their destruction. Yes, do not boast in the day of their distress. So not only did they do nothing, but they also rejoiced in the suffering of their relatives. Can you imagine? You see somebody that you're related to and they're hurting, and you're saying they're getting exactly what they deserve. Oh, good. And really, Edom's problem was not necessarily that they were happy that they got what they deserved, but their problem was that they were happy Israel was being destroyed so that they could be lifted up even higher, so they could be more powerful. They wanted to be the powerhouse of the region. And so when Judah or Israel was ransacked themselves, Edom was happy because they may have the upper hand in the long run. And so they were prideful over Judah's distress. Verse 13, here's the gate part that I was mentioning a minute ago. He says, do not enter the gate of my people in the day of their disaster. Yes, you. Do not gloat over their calamity in the day of their disaster. And do not loot their wealth in the day of their disaster. Do you see something here? See this pattern? Isn't it amazing how the Lord creates these patterns? So all these things, there's three things that they shouldn't do in the day of their disaster. Don't enter by the gate. Don't gloat. And do not loot. Three things that are mentioned right there. Edom is not to stand at the gate and wait for Judah to die. Don't stand there. So when Israel is attacked, and specifically when Israel is attacked by Babylon, that's the idea here. This is a prophecy about when Babylon comes in to destroy Jerusalem. When that happens, Edom shouldn't just stand back and watch it happen. Don't stand there at the gate while their brother is taken down. Don't stand there and do that. Don't watch it happen. And then don't go in and take what does not belong to you when they're being attacked. So when Israel is to be attacked by Babylon, Edom is not to be the people that are just watching it happen and then going in and taking whatever they want from the situation. Then he says this, verse 14, and do not stand at the fork of the road to cut down their fugitives, and do not imprison their survivors. And here it is again, in the day of their distress. When Israel is attacked by Babylon, Edom was not to stand back, nor at the gate, not at the gate, or stand back at the crossroads and wait for the people that are coming out of Jerusalem who are trying to escape from that attack. Don't wait for Israel to flee from there and then just kill them. Or take their survivors and imprison them. Don't do that. Yeah, there we go. I put that up there. Edom is not to stand at the crossroads and kill those who are fleeing Judah. And they are not to capture Judah's survivors and turn them over to their enemies. He says, for the day of the Lord draws near on all the nations. Now, here's the interesting part right here to me. It says, the day of the Lord draws near on all the nations. Not just Israel, not just Edom, not Egypt or the Arabs or the Maccabees, whoever. All nations, the Romans, whoever is going to come upon God's people. The day of the Lord's coming. And you know what? The day of the Lord is still coming upon all the nations, even the United States of America. The day of the Lord is coming. And he says, as you have done, it will be done to you. Your dealings will return on your own head. God wants Edom to know that though distress and calamity come upon Judah, it can and will come upon Edom also. And really, like I said, all the nations. What they did to the people of Judah, it's going to be done to them. It's going to be done to them. It makes me think about the passage at the very end of the book of Revelation, where it says, if you add anything to this book, you take anything from this book, the prophecies of this will come upon you. The judgment of God is going to come upon you. It also makes me think back to the blessing and the prophecy that God gives to Abraham, where he says, those nations that bless you, I will bless. And those nations that curse you, I will curse. And so here's an example of that. God's going to bring about a judgment on people who are against his people. Nations that rise up, not just nations, like I'm not talking just governmental ideas of people. I'm talking about just people that rise up against God's people. They're going to face destruction. They're going to face judgment from God. All right, so verse 16, he says, because you drank on my holy mountain, all the nations will drink continually. They will drink and swallow and become as if they never existed. Just as much as they had to take the judgment from the Lord, all the nations will also have to take the judgment from the Lord. After the day of the Lord, it will be as if none of the nations existed. And that's true too. When God brings judgment upon the people, there's no more boundaries. There's no more borders. There's no more law except God's law. Verse 17, he says, but on Mount Zion, there'll be those who escape. There's now hope. And he says, and it will be holy. And the house of Jacob will possess their possessions. So during the judgment on Mount Zion, there's going to be some who are rescued. God's people will be rescued, and it will be a sacred moment. And after this judgment on Mount Zion, Israel will be redeemed. Israel will be redeemed. This points for us a beautiful picture of Jesus and the church being established in Jerusalem. It says, then the house of Jacob will be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame, and the house of Esau will be as stubble, and they will set them on fire and consume them, so that there will be no survivor in the house of Esau, for the Lord has spoken. So who's going to survive? Well, the house of Jacob and the house of Joseph. But the house of Esau will be as this stubble. So during that judgment, Israel will be the fire and Esau will be the chaff. The chaff is the part of the wheat that's just like the shell around it that is just easily burned up. It's just wasted. It's a wasteland. And Esau will be like that stubble that's just left off, that's easily burned. And it will be completely devoured. No survivor in the house of Esau. Verse 19. And those of the Negev will possess the mountain of Esau. And those in Shephelah, the Philistine plain, also possess the territory of Ephraim and the territory of Samaria. And Benjamin will possess Gilead. What do we know? Is that God's people, Israel, will possess not only the mountain of Esau, that's Mount Seir, but all the land. All the land. He goes on to say, and the exiles of this host of the sons of Israel, who are among the Canaanites as far as Zarephath, and the exiles of Jerusalem who are in Shapharid, will possess the cities of the Negev. The Negev is the southern region, what that is, the south. Obadiah looks forward to the day when Israel will occupy and possess the land that belongs to Esau. See, this is where our premillennialists say, look, here's a prophecy when Israel will be the powerhouse again and possess everything. But we have to look at this in more of a past prophecy that's already taken place. Verse 21, the deliverers will ascend Mount Zion to judge the mountain of Esau, and the kingdom will be the Lord's. This is a note of encouragement. And really it's the central purpose of the prophecy of Obadiah. God's people will prevail, and the kingdom will prevail. Edom completely destroyed. Not a survivor won. But there'll be survivors who will deliver Israel. And God knows how to take care of his people and to advance his kingdom in a glorious way. So the immediate fulfillment, Edom began to be destroyed by Babylon in about 600 BC. They took over, Babylon took over Jerusalem 586. That they started going through Edom in 600. And they continued on into the 4th century when the Arabs forced them into the southern region of Judah. And then in the 2nd century when the Maccabees killed about 20,000 Edomites. This all took place. So this prophecy that Obadiah gives, it's taking place. Then this fellow by the name of John, I don't know how you pronounce that, Hyrcanus, in about 134 to 104, forced a few of them that were left and to accept circumcision and the law. But the coming of Jesus brought a spiritual kingdom that was established on Mount Zion in Jerusalem. That's what Obadiah is prophesying about. Before too long, all of Israel takes over everything. But not just Israel as in the nation, but a new Israel. A new Jerusalem. The church that Jesus established. The Edomites, really all nations, will be grafted into the house of Jacob, Israel. Acts chapter 15, this is what James writes about, or what he talks about in Acts chapter 15, about the Gentiles coming into the house of Israel. That's what it is. Everybody's going to be included in that. 4 things real quick and then I'll let you go. Lessons that we learn from Obadiah. Pride goes before destruction. How we treat each other matters. How we treat our relatives matter. We're to be good to each other, especially the household of faith. And don't rejoice when your enemy is hurt. That's right from Proverbs 24, verse 17 and 18. Don't rejoice. Sometimes we look at our enemy and say, oh good, they're getting what they deserve. And that's not the right way. It actually displeases God. That's what those verses say, Proverbs 24, 17, 18. It displeases God when we look at our enemy and we say, oh good, they're hurting. And then God provides deliverance in the church. In the church. That's where the redeemed are. In the church. It's in God's people. All right? That's the judgment of Edom as seen through the prophecy of Obadiah. Thank y'all very much.